What happens when a Hollywood legend faces a host who knows no boundaries? This moment on The View went viral, sparked heated debates, and left audiences in shock. Clint Eastwood, a cinematic icon, came to promote his latest directorial project, but no one was prepared for what happened next. The View studio buzzed with anticipation. Bright spotlights bathed the stage in warm light, and the live audience hummed with excitement, waiting for the guest. On the massive screen behind the hosts, clips from the trailer for Clint Eastwood's new film, a dramatic western already hailed as his possible final masterpiece, flashed by. Cameras hummed, operators checked angles, and producers and headsets coordinated timing. The atmosphere was electric. Everyone knew that Eastwood's appearance, a man whose career spanned 6 decades, was an event. Joy Behar, one of the hosts, sat at the table with her signature smile, teetering between hospitality and a hint of provocation. Beside her, Sarah Haynes nervously shuffled papers, while Sunny Hostin adjusted her glasses, preparing for the conversation. Whoopi Goldberg, as always, remained calm, though her eyes betrayed curiosity. The audience erupted in applause as Clint Eastwood stepped onto the stage, tall, with a posture that, despite his 95 years, exuded strength. His gray suit was impeccable, and his iconic squinting gaze instantly drew cheers. "Welcome, Clint!" Joy exclaimed, throwing her arms wide. "It's an honor to have you here. Your new film looks incredible, but we want to talk about more than just that." Her tone was playful, but there was a note that made Sunny glance at her warily. Eastwood merely nodded, taking his seat. His face was impassive, though the corners of his mouth twitched slightly in a smile. "All right," he said in his gravelly voice. "Let's play." The audience laughed, but a subtle tension hung in the air. Something told everyone, this interview wouldn't be ordinary. The conversation started lightly. Joy asked about the new film, how Eastwood, at 95, still made movies that left critics in awe. He answered briefly but with dignity, talking about his love for westerns and the importance of staying true to oneself. The audience listened, spellbound, and Sarah Haynes chimed in. "Your career is an inspiration. How do you find the energy?" Eastwood smiled. "I just don't stop." But Joy, seemingly waiting for her moment, leaned forward. "Clint, your film is a western, right? Strong heroes, clear good and evil. But let's be honest, the real world isn't that simple. You're known for your, let's say, conservative stance. Don't you think your films are a bit outdated for today's audience?" The studio fell silent. The camera zoomed in on Eastwood's face. His eyes narrowed, but he remained composed. The audience hushed, with only a cough from the back breaking the silence. Sarah Haynes let out a nervous laugh, trying to diffuse the tension. "Oh, Joy, you always go straight for it." But Joy pressed on, her smile sharpening. "I'm serious, Clint. The world has changed. People want complex stories, not cowboys shooting everyone they don't like." Eastwood leaned back slowly in his chair. His fingers subtly gripped the armrests. "I tell stories that make sense to me," he said quietly but firmly. "If they don't resonate with someone, that's their right. But I don't chase trends." His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of decades of experience. Whoopi Goldberg tried to intervene. "I think Clint's right. Art is about what you feel, not what's trendy." But Joy had latched onto her point. "Really, Clint? You're not just a director, you're an icon. People look up to you. But don't you think you're, how should I say, stuck in the past? Your views, your films, they don't always align with what we call progress." The silence in the studio was deafening. The camera operators froze, as if afraid to miss a moment. A producer in the control booth grabbed their head, whispering into a headset. The audience exchanged glances, some pulling out phones, sensing this could go viral. Eastwood looked at Joy, his gaze cold but not aggressive. "Progress," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "And what's progress to you, Joy?" Joy, sensing she'd hit a nerve, went all in. "Progress is acknowledging that the world is complex. Your heroes, Clint, always know who's bad and who's good. But in reality, it's not like that. You, for instance, support ideas that many consider controversial. Don't you think that alienates younger audiences? Sarah Haynes covered her face with her hands, whispering, "Oh God, Joy, stop." Sunny Hostin tried to steer the conversation. "Let's talk about the actors in your film, Clint. They're incredible." But Joy ignored her, leaning closer, her voice sharper. "I'm talking about how you've backed politicians who divide people. You make films about heroes, but isn't that hypocritical when your views don't always unify?" The audience gasped. Someone in the back shouted, "Whoa!" Eastwood slowly turned his head toward Joy. His face remained stoic, but his eyes burned. "You're accusing me of hypocrisy?" he asked softly, each word like a hammer strike. Joy, realizing she'd gone far but unwilling to back down, shrugged. "I'm just asking questions, Clint. People want to know who you really are." Whoopi raised a hand, trying to halt the escalation. "All right, let's pause. This show is about dialogue, not accusations." But Eastwood locked eyes with Joy. His gravelly voice cut through the silence. "I make movies. I tell stories. If you want to dig into politics or my life, that's your choice. But don't call me a hypocrite without knowing who I am." The studio erupted in applause. Some audience members stood, cheering for Eastwood. Joy, momentarily stunned, quickly recovered. "Oh, Clint, don't get so heated. We're just talking. But people say your films reflect your views. And if they're outdated, maybe it's time to step aside." Those words hit like a slap. The camera caught Eastwood clenching his fists, his jaw tightening. Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to disappear. The producers in the control booth gestured frantically, signaling the operators to keep a close-up. The audience split. Some cheered for Eastwood, others whispered, waiting for his response. The tension reached its peak, and it was clear what happened next would go down in television history. The View studio was on the verge of exploding. The tension, building after Joy Behar's provocative words, had reached a boiling point. Clint Eastwood, a cinematic legend, sat in his chair, his eyes narrowed to slits, fingers gripping the armrest tightly. The audience was frozen, cameras hummed, capturing every move, and producers in the control booth exchanged frantic signals. Joy's words, "Maybe it's time to step aside," hung in the air like a challenge. No one knew what Eastwood would do, but everyone felt it. This moment would become legendary. Joy Behar, sensing her words had struck a chord, leaned back in her chair with a barely concealed smirk. Her eyes gleamed. She knew the show's ratings were soaring. "I don't mean to offend you, Clint," she said, raising her hands in a mock gesture of peace. "But let's face it. Your films, your heroes, they belong to another era. The world has changed, and you seem stuck in the 70s. Isn't it time to let the younger generation take over?" The audience gasped. Someone in the back shouted, "That's too much." Sarah Haynes, seated next to Joy, covered her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Sunny Hostin tried to intervene. "Joy, let's get back to the film. Clint made an incredible movie But Joy cut her off, her gaze locked on Eastwood. "I'm just saying people want fresh ideas. You're a great director, but maybe your views, how should I put it, limit you." The camera caught a close-up of Eastwood. His face remained stoic, but faint wrinkles around his eyes betrayed the storm he was holding back. He leaned forward slowly, his gravelly voice slicing through the silence. "Limit me? Joy, I've been making films for 6 decades. I've seen the world change, people come and go. And you know what? I've never chased what's trendy. I tell stories that matter. If you think that's a limitation, maybe you're the one who's limited." The studio erupted in applause. Some audience members jumped to their feet, cheering for Eastwood. But Joy wasn't backing down. Her smile grew colder, her tone sharper. "Oh, Clint, that's a nice speech. But let's be honest. Your films glorify individualism, tough guys with guns. What about women? What about diversity? Have you ever thought your stories might not resonate with everyone?" Those words were like a punch below the belt. Whoopi Goldberg, who had been silent, raised her hand sharply. All right, Joy, that's enough. That's not fair. Clint is an artist, and his work speaks for itself. But Joy, sensing the moment was hers, pressed on. I just want him to explain why his films ignore modern realities. You don't deny your heroes are mostly white cowboys, right? The silence in the studio was deafening. The camera operators exchanged nervous glances. A producer in the control booth shouted into a headset. Keep the close-up. This is gold. The audience was divided. Some whispered in support of Joy, others booed angrily. Someone pulled out a phone and started recording, sensing this moment would flood social media. Eastwood stood slowly from his chair. His movements were deliberate, but each one radiated strength. The studio froze. Even Joy, usually unflappable, looked slightly rattled. He removed his microphone from his shirt, placed it on the table with a soft click, and stared directly at Joy. His gravelly voice filled the studio. I didn't come here to justify myself to you or anyone else. You want to talk about diversity? My films are about people who fight, love, and make mistakes. They're about humanity. If you only see cowboys, that's your problem, not mine. The audience exploded in cheers. Some shouted, Bravo, Clint! Sarah Haynes, who looked on the verge of tears from the tension, began clapping along with the crowd. Whoopi Goldberg nodded, her face showing respect. But Joy wasn't done. Well said, Clint, but you're dodging the question. Don't you think your views, your films, they're just not for this time? Eastwood turned to her, his eyes flashing. Joy, I've lived longer than most people in this studio. I've seen wars, crises, changes. And you know what? People haven't changed. They want stories that remind them who they are. You can call that outdated, but I call it the truth. And if you think you can belittle me or my work for a few clicks, you're mistaken. He paused, scanning the studio, then added, I'm not stepping aside. I do what I love, and I'll keep doing it as long as I can. And you, keep asking your questions. But next time, think about whether they're worth it. With that, he turned and walked toward the exit. His steps, firm, measured, echoed loudly in the silence. The studio door slammed shut, and the camera caught Joy sitting still, her lips pursed, her face flushed. The studio descended into chaos. The audience cheered, shouted, some cried. Camera operators scrambled to switch angles, capturing the host's reactions. Sarah Haynes looked stunned, her hands trembling as she tried to say something. Sunny Hostin shook her head, whispering, That was too much. Whoopi Goldberg, the only one maintaining composure, turned to the audience. All right, folks, let's take a break. We'll be back after the commercial. The producers in the control booth were in a frenzy. One shouted into a headset, This is a viral moment. Post the clip now. Phones in the audience lit up. Dozens were already uploading snippets to social media, adding hashtags like hashtag Clint Eastwood, hashtag The View, hashtag Epic Takedown. Twitter exploded with comments. Clint just destroyed Joy Behar. That was brutal but fair, Joy. You went too far. The next day, the moment dominated headlines. Clips of Eastwood's appearance racked up millions of views on YouTube and TikTok. Some called him a hero for defending his legacy, while others argued he dodged tough questions. Joy Behar posted a tweet, trying to smooth things over. That was a lively interview. Respect to Clint, but we're here to ask hard questions. But most commenters sided with Eastwood, accusing Joy of disrespecting a legend. The conflict sparked a broader conversation. Where's the line between criticism and humiliation? Does a host have the right to attack a guest for ratings? And should artists adapt to modern trends, or is there strength in staying true to themselves? Eastwood, as always, didn't comment further, but his new film broke box office records its opening weekend. What do you think of this conflict? Did Clint Eastwood do the right thing by walking out? Was Joy Behar justified in asking tough questions? Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated on stories like this.